Evening, an explosion lightly damaged a Jewish school in Amsterdam on Saturday in what authorities are calling a deliberate attack against the Jewish community. The attack caused minor damage to the outer wall of the school but did not cause any injuries. The incident comes just one day after Dutch police arrested 4 men on suspicion of setting off an explosion outside a synagogue in Rotterdam. And on Monday, there was an explosion that caused a fire at a synagogue in Liège, Belgium. And after yet another suspicious incident outside a synagogue in Norway, where police arrested 1 suspect. Now, according to reports, a new group calling itself the Islamic Movement of the Companions of the Right appear to claim responsibility for the attack in Belgium and for other attacks across Europe. Now, this is a previously unknown terrorist group with reported links to Hezbollah and the Islamic regime in Iran. And it's not just in Europe. In the United States, over the weekend, we saw a car ramming attack on a Michigan synagogue, the Temple Israel in West Bloomfield Township. The synagogue was set ablaze while dozens of children were still inside. The terrorist reportedly took his own life and no other deaths were reported. And so joining us now with more on this string of terror attacks against Jewish institutions throughout Europe and in the United States is veteran journalist and Middle East expert Tom Gross. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you hear us?
Yes, good.
Great.
Good to be with you.
So I do want to discuss the rising anti-Semitism that's hitting Europe today. You know, every time we see Israel involved in a war, really since Israel came under attack on October 7th, we are seeing Jews worldwide, especially in Europe, being targeted. So first of all, let's discuss the latest incidents in Belgium and in the Netherlands. I mean, what more can you tell us about these attacks?
Well, we don't know details. I mean, the main thing is, thankfully, no one was injured. But it is not okay when a school is firebombed, as it was in Amsterdam, which of course was, let me remind people, of all countries in West Europe, the Netherlands was the country that was most hit, the Jewish community, in the Holocaust. So what we see is that anti-Semitism now is everywhere. Just as Jews in Israel are being rocketed from Eilat in the south to Metula in the north, so worldwide there is anti-Semitism, and it's coming from every direction. As you mentioned, a group has claimed responsibility, which is an Islamist group. If it was only political or only Islamist, we might be able to identify the problem. But as we know, it's coming from the left, it's coming from the Green Party in Britain, it's coming from the right, Tucker Carlson types, it's coming sometimes from Christians, sometimes from Muslims, it's coming from working class people, it's coming from educated academics, and so on. And it is a very dangerous situation. It is not the case that it's just the result of mirroring some kind of violence or war in the Middle East, because unfortunately anti-Semitism happens all the time. I mean, for example, there were a whole bunch of incidents before the recent Iran war at a time when there's a ceasefire in Gaza and nothing else is going on. One of the ones that shocked me most is little Andorra, a country that most people have never heard of. It's a tiny little principality between Spain and France. Last month in February, for the Christian festival of Lent, they dressed up a Jewish effigy, put it over the town square, put it on trial, found it guilty, and then burned it. And this is Andorra, a tiny little country where I wasn't even aware there were Jews, although apparently there is a small community there. Then we have other incidents that are not being reported unless you follow these things very carefully. For example, in Toronto, Canada, 3 different synagogues have been shot at with gunfire a few days ago. And, friends of mine who follow the news were shocked to hear about this because it didn't make the news. Now, it's not just some violent incidents. There's a whole legitimization going on, starting with people like the mayor of New York, going to other members of Congress, going to very important influencers like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens on the right, who have millions of followers. You know, Candace Owens is blaming Israel for the bombing in Iran of the school, which if anybody was responsible for, it was the United States. Israel doesn't have Tomahawk missiles, but Candace Owens says, oh no, we know it's Israel. And then she added separately that that we know that Israel is practicing in Iran because it then wants to send in the Air Force to bomb America. I mean, this would be hilarious, but it's not, because it's leading to real life violence, as we've seen.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, Candace Owens blaming Israel for just about everything that you could possibly think of. And so I do want to ask, you know, we're seeing, as you so eloquently put it, such an incredible rise in anti-Semitism from all aspects of society. What are the governments of European countries? What is the government of the UK? What is the government of the United States doing to combat this rising phenomenon?
Okay, so first, the good news. There is wall-to-wall condemnation. There are also condemnation from people of their own sides. So, for example, in the United States, you've had Senator Ted Cruz and Senator Tom Cotton very firmly denouncing anti-Semitism from within the ranks of the Republican Party. That's welcome that they should do so. In Europe, there is, of course, condemnation. The problem is there's also fear electorally of the Islamist vote. I don't say the Muslim vote, because obviously not all Muslims are anti-Semitic or anti-Israel, but there's a large chunk of among the Muslim populations in places like Britain where they want to have it both ways. They're worried that, you know, the Labour Party, Keir Starmer in power in Britain, they lost a very important by-election, a special election a few days ago, to the Green Party, which is led by an anti-Zionist Jew, and his deputy is a Muslim who basically celebrated the October 7th attacks. So in other words, they have found an anti-Zionist Jew to put as their front man for increasing anti-Semitism within the party. And then, of course, they say, we can't be anti-Semitic because we're led by a Jew. Well, actually, he is a Jewish anti-Semite, and anyone who bothers to study history will be aware that there have been Jewish anti-Semites in Soviet Russia, in Nazi Germany, in the Spanish Inquisition. You know, there was a small chapter of Jews that wanted to join the Nazi Party. The fact there are a few crazy people or a few people that are trying to save their own skins shouldn't let the wider public be fooled that the Green Party in Britain has not been hijacked by anti-Semites, and it's less interested in environmental or green issues and more interested in globalizing the Intifada, which, when challenged, they say things like, oh, well, Intifada just means you know, like an uprising, it's not violent. To which I say, well, you know, Mein Kampf, the word Kampf in German just means struggle. I think we all know what it means when people are screaming, globalize the Intifada at Jews. It's a call for violence, and it's not okay that you have politicians, including the mayor of New York, not denouncing this properly.
I do want to ask, because we know that what begins with the Jews never ends with the Jews. You know, we're seeing radical Islamization of Europe. There are those who are waking up to this fact in Europe, but most Europeans seem, at least from the outside, entirely indifferent to the situation, to this reality. I mean, what is your analysis of this?
No, it's not indifference. The problem is that the mainstream parties are paralyzed with fear. It's appeasement. So what's happened is you have far-right parties, which are now leading in the opinion polls. It's quite possible that France is going to have, as president, the National Rally, formerly called the National Front, a far-right party. Either Le Pen or her deputy may be French president at the next election. In Britain, the Reform Party, led by Nigel Farage, and he's not exactly far-right, but he's firmly right. They're ahead in the polls. The AfD, which is an extremist right-wing party in Germany, is also doing very well. So the problem is the mainstream parties must address the issues of Islamic anti-Semitism, and not just anti-Semitism. They must address the issues of Islamism pushing back against liberal values in general, for women, for gays. It's not just a Jewish question. And if they don't do that, it's left to the far right, which isn't good news for Jews either, especially a party like the AfD in Germany. I think are very suspicious because of their kind of formerly Nazi connections of some, not all, members of the AfD. So they are kind of paralyzed in Britain. They condemn it. One good thing is the French Prime Minister has announced that they're going to criminalize anti-Zionism, which he said is a form of anti-Semitism. So it's important not to let people disguise their anti-Semitism through other means like anti-Zionism, and separate what would be legitimate criticism of Israel from what is so often the case, nothing to do with Israel or Palestine or Gaza. It's just pure anti-Semitism hidden under the word Zionist.
Well, Tom Gross, we are almost out of time, but I want to thank you so much for joining us to discuss this important issue.
Thank you.
And that's all the time we have for our special live coverage of Operation Roaring Lion. I'm Ladar Lazi. See you next time.